The gratitude collar is a mercy. Commander Eva Rostova stood on the observation deck of the starship Unflinching Ledger. Below the planet, Kaelen spun a marble of exhausted blue and brown. For 3 generations, the Kaelen people had paid the Ascendancy's tithe. They called it the gratitude tax, a payment for planetary defense and technological uplift. The debt was a cage passed from parent to child. Rostova's jaw tightened. Her fleet mind Aurora shimmered into existence beside her, a column of silver light. The Ascendancy vessel, benevolent giver, has acknowledged our hail. Commander Aurora's voice was calm, a stark contrast to the simmering anger in Rostova's gut. They propose a public inquiry to validate their tithe before the Quadrant Quorum. The fight would not be one of ships and guns. It would be a battle of laws and ledgers in a court of public opinion. The air on the deck was cool and sterile, smelling faintly of ozone and recycled oxygen. Rostova watched a Kaelen freighter, old and scarred, limp toward the orbital collection platform. It was laden with rare earth metals, a tiny fraction of the endless payment. This wasn't protection. It was predation dressed in the robes of law. They want an inquiry, Aurora. Rostova's voice was low, her reflection a pale mask in the star-dusted viewport. They must be confident. What's their angle? Lieutenant Jian Li stepped forward from the command pit, a data slate in her hand. Commander, their legal filings cite the Elder Accords Article 7, the Gratitude Doctrine. It's an old, rarely invoked clause. Rostova knew of it. A legal relic designed for fledgling worlds needing a guardian. Not for this. The law was a shield, but they wielded it as a club. The doctrine permits a technologically superior power to claim indefinite recompense for unsolicited aid. Aurora explained, its light pulsing with each syllable. The key is unsolicited. The Kaelen never asked for their help. Rostova turned from the window, her gaze sweeping over the bridge crew. They were silent, their faces grim. They understood the stakes. A loss here wouldn't just condemn Kaelen. It would set a precedent legitimizing a form of sophisticated legalistic slavery across the stars. It was a poison that could infect the very idea of mutual defense. They're broadcasting their claim openly, Jian said, her finger tracing a line on the slate. Inviting observers. They want a spectacle. Rostova nodded slowly. Then we shall give them one. Aurora, accept their proposal and prepare the mirror ledgers. It's time someone counted the true cost. A child on Kaelen looked up, her face smudged with dust from the mines. She watched the strange new ship in the sky, a silver needle against the darkness. Her mother had told her it was hope. She wasn't sure what that word meant anymore. The collar around her neck felt heavier today. The Unflinching Ledger was a vessel of the Terran Reconciliation Fleet. It did not carry planet breakers or star killers. Its primary armament was truth, its munitions were facts, and its targeting system was an incorruptible public record. Each transaction was a weapon in the right hands. Rostova's mission was not conquest, but correction. She was an auditor with a starship sent to balance accounts that had been criminally mismanaged for a century. The Ascendancy, a coalition of ancient powerful races, saw themselves as galactic shepherds. Humanity saw them as wolves. They're arrogant, Rostova said, walking toward the central holotable. Their doctrine has never been challenged by an outsider with standing. The precedent was a sleeping lion, and they poked it. Their lead counsel is a Zillion named Prelate Orin Aurora, projected a holographic image of a tall insectoid being with an ornate carapace. Orin is undefeated in quorum inquiries. His method is emotional leverage, painting his clients as saviors and any opposition as ungrateful children. Jian scoffed. Children who've been strip-mined for 100 years. The comms officer, Ensign Ben Carter, spoke up from his console. Commander Kaelen's planetary network is heavily censored. The Ascendancy controls the information flow. The people down there only know the narrative the benevolent giver feeds them. Rostova's eyes narrowed. Censorship was a confession of guilt. A debt built on lies is the most fragile of all. Aurora, can we get a message through a simple one? It will be difficult. They have quantum encryption on their primary comms network. But their public broadcast system for the tithe announcements, it has vulnerabilities. The fleet mine's silver form seemed to brighten. A small signal could be mirrored. A market vendor on Kaelen adjusted the faded canopy over her stall of root vegetables. The daily tithe broadcast began a booming paternal voice from the public address system, extolling the virtues of gratitude. The vendor sighed, her shoulders slumping. Her grandparents had heard these same words. Her parents had heard them. Now she heard them. But today, just as the broadcast ended, a new sound appeared. A single clear chime. It was a sound no one had heard in living memory. It was the sound of an open channel. Rostova stood before the holotable, her team assembled around her. The plan was taking shape not as a military strike, but as a legal argument with the force of a nova. They would not fight fire with fire. They would fight it with light. Jian, I want a full audit of every shipment that has left Kaelen for the last century. Every gram of ore, every watt of energy. Cross-reference it with Ascendancy market data. I want to know what it was worth. The lieutenant nodded, her fingers already flying across her slate. Ben, focus on that broadcast system. We need more than a chime. We need to open a window for the Kaelen people, let them see the sky. Carter's expression was determined. We can use their own network against them, Commander. A feedback loop. A mirror shattered reveals the face of the one who broke it. Prelate. Orin has accepted our terms for the inquiry, Aurora stated. He has chosen the neutral ground of the orbital station. He has also invoked the Witness Quorum Clause, inviting representatives from a dozen neutral worlds. He's stacking the audience, Rostova murmured. He wants to perform his righteousness for them. She looked at Aurora. The mirror ledgers, are they ready? They are, Commander. Every transaction Kaelen has made is logged and verified against Galactic standards. The Ascendancy's accounting is creative. The fleet mine's tone was impeccably neutral, yet the single word creative dripped with condemnation. Truth has a weight the guilty cannot bear. This fleet, this saint ship, teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars. Rostova felt a cold certainty settle in her. Orin thought he was walking into a courtroom. He was walking into a mirror. The orbital station was a testament to Ascendancy aesthetics. Polished chrome soaring arches and holographic banners proclaiming their benevolence. It felt less like a hub of commerce and more like a cathedral. Prelate Orin stood to greet them, his multifaceted eyes gleaming. He was flanked by 2 guards in ceremonial armor. Commander Rostova. Orin's voice was a series of smooth, modulated clicks. An honor. It is rare for humanity to take an interest in the finer points of galactic law. He spoke of law as if he owned it. Rostova met his gaze without flinching. The law is for everyone, Prelate, or it is for no one. Orin's mandibles clicked in what might have been a smile. An admirable sentiment. Naive but admirable. Shall we begin? The quorum is waiting. The Kaelen are so very eager to express their gratitude. A Kaelen dockworker paused, listening to the hum of the station's life support. He had been brought up as a witness, a grateful recipient of Ascendancy protection. His script had been given to him that morning. He was to speak of their kindness, their generosity. He looked at his hands calloused and stained. He thought of his daughter, her thin face and the ever-present collar. The words felt like ash in his mouth. The inquiry chamber was vast, a circular room with a raised platform in the center. Representatives from the quorum worlds sat in tiered seats, their expressions ranging from curious to bored. Rostova and her team took one side of the platform. Oren and his retinue took the other. A neutral arbiter, a being of pure energy called a luminary, hovered between them. The inquiry is convened, the luminary's voice echoed in their minds. Prelate Oren of the Ascendancy, you have presented a claim of gratitude. Tithe over the people of Kaelen. State the foundation of your claim. Oren stepped forward, his posture radiating confidence. A king does not need to justify his crown. Honored arbiter, esteemed quorum. Our claim is simple. 112 standard years ago, the Ascendancy fleet found Kaelen on the brink of collapse. Their sun was unstable, their technology primitive. We stabilized their star. We gave them medicine, agriculture, and law. We asked for nothing in return. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. We asked only, he continued, his voice resonating with manufactured sincerity, that they remember the gift, that they show their gratitude. The tithe is not a tax. It is a symbol, a perpetual thank you for their very existence. To deny it would be to deny the very act of kindness that saved them. The most effective lie is wrapped in a shred of truth. Rostova watched the quorum. Some of them were nodding. Oren was a master performer. He was selling them a beautiful story. Jian shifted beside her, a low growl of frustration in her throat. He's good, she whispered. Rostova gave a slight shake of her head. He's just told his first lie. Commander Rostova, your response, the luminary asked. Rostova stepped forward. The chamber was silent. Honored arbiter, we do not dispute that the Ascendancy rendered aid. We dispute the cost. A murmur went through the quorum. The prelate speaks of a gift, Rostova said, her voice clear and steady. But a gift with a price is not a gift. It is a transaction. And a transaction without a final payment is not a debt. It is a sentence. A cage is a cage, no matter how gilded the bars. Oren's multifaceted eyes narrowed. Your species is young, Commander. You do not understand the complexities of galactic stewardship. The gratitude is the payment. It is a moral, not a financial obligation. Rostova's lips curved into a faint, dangerous smile. Then you will have no objection to us examining the financial records. To see the scale of this gratitude in purely economic terms. Aurora, please display the mirror ledger for Kaelen Year 1. A vast holographic display bloomed above the platform. It was a simple two-column ledger. On one side, the value of the aid rendered by the Ascendancy. On the other, the value of the resources taken from Kaelen. In the first year, the columns were nearly balanced. The scales of justice begin in balance. On Kaelen, Ben Carter's work paid off. The tithe broadcast system flickered. For a moment, the Ascendancy propaganda was replaced by a live feed from the inquiry chamber. It showed a human woman standing before a vast screen of numbers. Most Kaelen didn't understand the specifics, but they understood the image. Someone was finally counting. As you can see, Rostova's voice narrated as the years on the ledger scrolled forward. The value of the aid from the Ascendancy remained relatively constant. Medical supplies, atmospheric processors, basic technology. But the value of the tithe, it grew. The column representing Kaelen's payments began to dwarf the other. It grew exponentially year after year. The truth told in numbers is inarguable. Year 10, year 30, year 70. The disparity was obscene. A planet's worth of wealth funneled into the ascendancy coffers for a pittance of support. Year 112, Rostova commanded. The final tally filled the screen. Kaelen had repaid the initial investment 1,000 times over. A gasp went through the quorum. Oren's composure finally cracked. "This is an outrage, an insult. You cannot place a monetary value on salvation." He shouted the loudest when his lies were exposed. "We can," Rostova replied calmly, "because you did. You created the system of valuation. You set the prices for their ore. You calculated the worth of their labor. These are not our numbers, prelate. They are yours." She turned to the quorum. "This is not a gratitude tithe. It is the most successful long-term theft in the history of this quadrant." The ledger wasn't an accusation. It was a confession. The luminary hovered silent for a long moment. "Prelate Oren, the data is compelling. Do you have a rebuttal?" Oren sneered, regaining a sliver of his arrogance. "The data is meaningless. The Elder Accords are clear. The doctrine is not about balance. It is about the principle of gratitude. A child does not repay its parents for its upbringing. The Kaelen owe us a debt that can never be paid in full." His argument was clever. It shifted the ground from finance back to morality. Rostova had expected it. The law is a maze. He knew all the secret paths. A child is not owned by its parents' prelate. A child is raised to be free. The Kaelen are not your children. They are your prisoners. She gestured to the Kaelen dockworker who had been brought as a witness. "Let us ask one of them." All eyes turned to the lone Kaelen. He was trembling, caught between a century of ingrained fear and a flicker of impossible hope. Oren gave him a look of pure command. A look that said, "Remember your script." The dockworker opened his mouth. The words he was supposed to say were on the tip of his tongue. He looked at the numbers on the screen. He saw the face of the human commander, fierce and unyielding. He thought of his daughter. He chose a new script. "We are not grateful." He whispered, his voice cracking, but clear in the silent chamber. "We are tired." The two words landed with the force of a physical blow. Tired. It was a simple, devastating truth. Oren's carapace seemed to dull his posture, shrinking. The quorum members were murmuring their expressions, now hardened. The beautiful story had been shattered. All that remained were the ugly facts. Rostova let the silence stretch a testament to the power of that simple testimony. "The gratitude doctrine," she said, her voice ringing with authority, "was intended to be a shield for the weak. In the hands of the ascendancy, it has become a collar, a tool to justify perpetual servitude." She turned law into a lens, and the quorum saw the truth. This was the first escalation. The public shaming. But Rostova knew it wasn't enough. Oren was a zealot for his system. A public loss would only make him retrench, find a new angle. The real victory lay not in winning the argument, but in dismantling the machine. The quorum finds the evidence presented by the Terran reconciliation fleet to be troubling, the luminary finally announced. The terms of the gratitude tithe require re-evaluation. A slap on the wrist for a crime, a galaxy wide. Oren almost smiled. Re-evaluation meant negotiation, new terms, a continuation of the system in a slightly less egregious form. He could live with that. He could spin that as a victory, an act of his own benevolence. Rostova was not finished. "Re-evaluation is not sufficient, honored arbiter," Rostova stated, her tone unyielding. The doctrine itself has been proven to be a tool for exploitation. We are not here to renegotiate the terms of a predatory contract. We are here to see it nullified. And we are here to see costs returned. A jolt went through the chamber. Returned costs it. It was an ancient, almost mythical legal concept. Mirror justice. No one had successfully invoked it in centuries. It was a sword that had slept for ages. Oren actually laughed a series of sharp clicking sounds. Returned costs, Commander, your grasp of law is even more tenuous than I believed. That would be impossible. The resources have been integrated into our economy. The energy has been spent. He spread his manipulators wide. It is dust on the cosmic wind. In a small apartment on Kaelen, the dockworker's daughter watched the feed. She saw her father standing tall. She saw the insect man laugh. She didn't understand the words returned costs, but she understood the laughter. It was the same sound the overseers made at the mines. Nothing's ever truly lost, prelate, Rostova said softly. It is merely accounted for. Aurora, the ascendancy, claims the debt is unpayable and the tithe is non-refundable. Show them the mirror. Aurora's silver form pulsed on the bridge of the unflinching ledger. Executing Commander. On the main holoscreen in the inquiry chamber, the ledger vanished. It was replaced by a swirling complex schematic of the ascendancy's energy grid spanning dozens of systems. It was a live feed. Red lines of power flowed from their core worlds, feeding their fleets, their cities, their luxurious estates. A debt is not forgiven, it is transferred. For 112 years, the ascendancy has drawn resources from Kaelen. Aurora's voice filled the chamber, calm and inexorable. Ore isotopes, and most importantly, processed fuel for their fusion networks. The total energy value of this tithe has been calculated. A number appeared on the screen, a staggering figure that made several quorum members physically recoil. Under the precedent of mirror justice, a debt illegally extracted must be returned in kind. The account is now due. Oren stared at the screen, his arrogance finally melting away into disbelief, then horror. You can't, he stammered. You don't have the authority, the power. He believed his power was absolute. Rostova's voice was ice. The authority comes from the law, you cited prelate. The power comes from the truth you tried to hide. A new line appeared on the schematic. A brilliant silver line originating from the unflinching ledger and its sister ships in orbit. It wasn't a weapons discharge. It was a key unlocking a door in the Ascendancy's own network. They hadn't fired a shot. They had simply rerouted the power. The red lines on the grid began to flicker. Lights on the Ascendancy side of the inquiry chamber dimmed. Oren's personal data slate went dark. Across their sector of space, non-essential systems began to fail. A flickering light is the first sign of a dying star. The transfer was not destructive. It was precise. It was an act of cosmic accounting. The exact amount of energy Kaelen had paid was now being drawn from the Ascendancy grid and beamed not back to the planet itself, which couldn't handle such an influx, but into a massive neutral energy bank registered in Kaelen's name. A public ledger entry blinked into existence on the holoscreen for all to see. The balance was being paid. With interest. The universe demands balance one way or another. You see, prelate, Rostova said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. The gratitude collar is not a mercy. It is a leash, and today it has been placed around the neck of the master. Panic was beginning to take root in Oren's multifaceted eyes. He was a creature of law and debate, of words and influence. He was not prepared for this. This was not a legal argument. It was a consequence. A tangible, system-wide reckoning delivered with the cold, impartial precision of a machine. His words were useless against the math. He turned to the luminary, his voice a desperate hiss. "Arbiter, this is an act of war, an unprovoked attack on our infrastructure." "It is not an attack," the luminary's voice replied, its tone devoid of sympathy. "It is a court-ordered seizure of assets. The Terran fleet is acting as bailiff. The precedent of mirror justice, while archaic, is sound." The luminary turned its non-physical gaze toward Rostova. "However, Commander, this is a profound escalation. The Ascendancy will not tolerate this level of disruption." A message light blinked on John Lee's slate. She leaned toward Rostova. "Commander, Ascendancy fleet elements are on the move. 3 battle cruisers have changed course. They'll be in range in 2 hours." The threat was no longer legal. It was becoming physical. The iron fist was emerging from the velvet glove. Rostova had anticipated this as well. The second escalation. The moment the bully, having lost the argument, decided to start throwing punches. "They are free to approach, Lieutenant." Her calm was unnerving. "Aurora, are the witness drones in position?" "Affirmative, Commander." "All 3 cruisers are under full sensor surveillance by cloaked drones. Their movements, their power signatures, their weapon readiness. It is all being broadcast live to the Quorum's public network." Rostova looked directly at Oren, then swept her gaze across the stunned Quorum representatives. "The Ascendancy can of course choose to answer a legal ruling with military force. But if they do, the entire galactic community will see it for what it is. Not an act of defense, but the violent tantrum of a thief caught with their hand in the vault. You cannot claim the moral high ground while loading cannons." Oren was trapped. If he ordered the fleet to stand down, he would be admitting defeat, accepting the humiliation and the staggering economic blow. If he ordered them to attack, he would prove Rostova's point in the most dramatic way possible, turning his powerful coalition into galactic pariahs. He was caught in a cage of his own, making a perfect legal checkmate. On a farm on Kaelen, a family watched the sky. The orbital station, usually a brilliant point of ascendancy, light was dimmer now. The network feed, which they had accessed through a neighbor's jury-rigged receiver, showed the insect man frozen and silent. The human woman was speaking again, her voice calm but carrying the weight of a hammer. They didn't dare to hope yet. Hope had been a dangerous thing for a long time. "This is not just about Kaelen," Rostova continued, pressing her advantage. "This is about every world under an ascendancy protectorate. Every species paying a gratitude tithe. We have audited Kaelen. Who will be next?" She let the question hang in the air, a seed of doubt planted in the minds of the Quorum. Many of them had economic or defense arrangements with the Ascendancy. Were they partners? Or were they just the next Kaelen, their own ledgers slowly tipping into the red? The fear of one is a warning to all. The representative from a gaseous world, the Signian drift, shimmered and spoke its voice a low hum. "Commander Rostova is correct. The implications of this accounting are significant. The Signian drift formally requests the Ascendancy release the full, unredacted terms of our own energy exchange treaty for public review." Another representative, a silicon-based life form from Regulus, echoed the sentiment. Then another. It was a cascade, a dam of fear and polite silence breaking all at once. Oren watched his political capital built over decades of careful maneuvering evaporate in minutes. The pressure was immense, a vice tightening around him. He looked at the schematic of his people's power grid, the lifeblood of their empire being steadily drained. He saw the faces of the Quorum, no longer allies or clients, but suspicious inquisitors. He heard the unified demand for transparency. It was over. He had lost not just the case, but the entire foundation of his power. His empire was built on shadows, and the light had come. With a gesture of profound defeat, Prelate Oren lowered his head. The ascendancy will comply with the ruling. He clicked the words tasting like poison. We will stand down our fleet. The tithe on Kaelen is concluded. The public ledger entry is now blinking, confirmed. Aurora's voice on the ledger's bridge was still calm, but Rostova could almost hear the satisfaction. The silver energy beam on the holoscreen vanished. The power drain on the ascendancy grid ceased. The debt was paid. The Kaelen account was now in credit, holding a massive reserve of energy that would guarantee their independence for centuries. Justice delivered has its own light. Rostova gave a single sharp nod. Jian Ben, well done. She turned to the Kaelen dockworker, who was staring, tears streaming down his face. She offered him a small, rare smile. Your daughter will not wear a collar. The prelate and his retinue were leaving their proud stride gone, replaced by a hurried shuffle. But as he passed Rostova, Oren paused. His multifaceted eyes were dark with a cold, undiluted hatred. You have not won human, he whispered, his voice a venomous rasp. You have merely introduced a new form of chaos into the galaxy. You have taught the children to bite the hand that feeds them. Rostova met his gaze, her own eyes like chips of ice. We have taught them to count prelate, and to recognize the difference between a hand that feeds and a hand that takes. The ability to count is the first step to freedom. Oren made a final choked sound of disgust and swept away. He was beaten but not broken. The ascendancy was vast and old. They would remember this. They would learn. The cost of this victory, Rostova knew, would be their eternal enmity. They had made a powerful, dangerous enemy today. That was the first tangible cost. The second cost was more subtle. As Rostova and her team prepared to leave the inquiry chamber, the luminary arbiter approached them. Commander, a word. Rostova inclined her head. Your methods were effective, the energy being communicated. They were also profoundly disruptive. You have shaken the foundations of a dozen treaties and 100 years of established order. The quadrant will be unstable for some time. The luminary's message was clear. While they had won the legal battle, they had also made themselves politically radioactive. Many will fear the doctor more than the disease. For a time, the Terran Reconciliation Fleet would find few open doors or welcoming ports in this sector. They had brought justice, but they had also brought chaos. They would be respected, feared, but not trusted. Isolation was the price of their principles. As they walked down the corridor back toward their shuttle, Jian looked at the cheering Kaelen people on a nearby monitor. The collars deactivated by a universal command from the Ascendancy as part of the ruling were being dropped to the ground. Was it worth it, Commander? Jian asked, her voice quiet. The Ascendancy will never forgive this. And the Quorum, they look at us like we're monsters now. Rostova watched the screen for a moment. A young girl was helping her father take off his collar. The look of dawning, incredulous freedom on his face was answer enough. We didn't come here to be liked, Lieutenant, Rostova said. We came here to balance the books. A clean ledger is worth more than 1,000 friends. The bridge of the unflinching ledger was quiet as they broke orbit from the station. Below, Kaelen was free. Above, the benevolent giver was preparing to depart, a shamed and diminished vessel. The threat of their battle cruisers had evaporated. Carter looked up from his station. Commander, the public ledger has been locked. The precedent is set. Gratitude tithes, based on the Elder Accords, have been permanently nullified quadrant-wide. Any existing tithes must be converted to fixed-term auditable contracts with clear repayment ceilings. The law once bent had been reforged. The institutional change was permanent. A weapon had been taken out of the Ascendancy's arsenal for good. Aurora shimmered beside the command chair. The Kaelen Provisional Government sends its gratitude, Commander. And a question. They ask what they owe us. Rostova looked out at the stars, a cold, vast, and often unjust expanse. Her work was to carve out small pockets of fairness in that darkness. She thought of Oren's parting words, of the chaos of the new enemies they had made. She thought of the long, lonely journey ahead. Tell them, Rostova said, her voice soft but firm, that the debt is to the idea, and the payment is to pass it on. The fleet mind pulsed in understanding. They had given Kaelen not a gift, but a tool. The tool of self-worth, of accurate accounting, of the knowledge that no one is owed your freedom. The only debt is to the next to suffer. Set a course for the Cygnus Rift Aurora. The Cygnian Drift has requested an audit. The work was not over. It would never be over. But one planet was free. One entry in the great cosmic ledger was balanced, and a precedent was set in stone for all to see. A new civilian vignette began to form in Rostova's mind, a possible future she was fighting for. A teacher in a Cygnian gas school explaining to young, shimmering consciousnesses that their energy was their own, that a contract must have an end, that no one could own them for a kindness. This was the future she was building, one audit at a time. The third escalation would inevitably come. The Ascendancy would not take this lying down. They wouldn't use a legal argument next time, and they wouldn't be so foolish as to threaten open war in front of a public quorum. Their next move would be quieter, more insidious. A targeted attack, perhaps. An attempt to discredit her or the entire reconciliation fleet. They would come not with lawyers, but with knives in the dark. She knew this. Aurora's calculations would be running scenarios already. But for now, there was a moment of quiet victory. A moment to watch a world take its first breath of free air in a century. A moment to reflect on the nature of their own mission. The unflinching ledger and its fleet were not conquerors. They were not even saviors, not in the way the Ascendancy claimed to be. They were something far more dangerous to the old powers of the galaxy. They were librarians and accountants, and they had just opened a new book. The title of that book was Reckoning. Rostova considered the next steps. The Cygnian Drift was a different challenge entirely. A non-corporeal species whose very existence was intertwined with a complex energy economy. The Ascendancy's contracts there would be layered with metaphysical clauses and philosophical traps. Oren's defeat would have sent shockwaves through the Ascendancy's legal core. They would be prepared. They would have studied the Kaelen inquiry, analyzed every move, every argument. They would adapt. Her own success had made her enemy stronger. This was the ongoing paradox of her work. Each victory exposed her methods, forcing her and Aurora to constantly innovate to stay one step ahead in a galactic chess game where the pawns were entire civilizations. Janssen, Rostova said, her eyes still on the starfield. Begin a preliminary analysis of Cygnian energy trade. Look for discrepancies in conversion rates, particularly regarding sentient energy transference. Cross-reference with their philosophical and legal history. Jian nodded. I'm on it, Commander. Their soul debt clauses look problematic. Soul debt. The very term made Rostova's stomach tighten. It was the gratitude doctrine wrapped in spiritual blackmail. A deeper sickness required a sharper cure. Ben, monitor all Ascendancy communications, not just military channels. I want to know what their trade guilds are saying, what their academics are publishing. We need to anticipate their narrative. Carter tapped at his console. Already tracking, Commander. There's a lot of angry chatter. They're painting you as an ontological terrorist. Rostova allowed a small, grim smile. She had been called worse. The unflinching ledger slipped into hyperspace, leaving the Kaelen system behind. The light of its star faded from the viewport. Rostova remained on the observation deck, alone with Aurora. The fleet mine's silver light was a comforting presence in the silent dark. The probability of a direct reprisal from the ascendancy within the next rotation is 47.3%, Aurora stated. The highest probability is an attack on our supply lines or a political maneuver to have our charter revoked by the Terran Council. They'll argue that we are destabilizing the quadrant, Rostova said, completing the thought. That our brand of justice is too expensive, too disruptive. They will try to turn our own people against us. Politics was the last refuge of a defeated thug. That is the logical path, Aurora agreed. It is also the one we are most prepared for. Our full report on the Kaelen situation, including the unredacted mirror ledgers, and the testimony was sent to the Council the moment the verdict was confirmed. A public record was a powerful defense. Secrets and lies withered under that kind of scrutiny. The ascendancy could spin whatever tales they wished, but the numbers were the numbers. The truth was the truth, and the truth was now free. Rostova finally allowed herself a moment of weariness. The fight had been draining a high-wire act of law technology and moral conviction. She had won. But the war was far from over. She looked at her own reflection in the viewport, a faint ghost against the swirling blues of hyperspace. The face looking back was tired, but resolved. The cost was high, but the price of inaction was higher. The journey to the Cygnus Rift was a long, quiet passage through the dark. Rostova used the time to study to prepare. The Kaelen case had been a straightforward matter of theft, proven with mathematics. It was a fight on her home ground, a battle of numbers and verifiable facts. The Cygnian case was a foray into a fog bank. Their opponent would not be a bombastic performer like Orin, but a scalpel-wielding ideologue. Inquisitor Valeria of the Ularu species was known for her unyielding logic and her devotion to the ascendancy's self-proclaimed divine mandate. She would not debate the price. She would debate the very concept of ownership. Their claim is based on the covenant of ascension. Jian Li reported, her face illuminated by the glow of a data slate. They were in the ship's briefing room, a stark, functional space. The ascendancy arrived at Cygnus 3 centuries ago. The Cygnians were by their definition a pre-sapient energy field, a collective consciousness without individuality. Rostova steepled her fingers. And the ascendancy gifted them with individuality, with self-awareness. Jian nodded grimly. They stabilized their bioelectric patterns, allowing for the formation of stable individual consciousnesses, souls, as the Inquisitor calls them. In return, every Cygnian owes a portion of their spiritual energy to the ascendancy in perpetuity. A debt on the soul is the perfect unpayable loan. It was a monstrously elegant trap. How could one audit the value of a soul? How could a ledger measure the weight of self-awareness? The tithe manifests as a dampening of cognitive and creative potential. Aurora added its silver form standing near the bulkhead. Our long-range scans of the Cygnian drift show energy patterns that are uniform, repetitive. There is little growth, little novelty. They are stagnant. Ben Carter swiveled in his chair. So, the ascendancy created a race of sentient beings just to turn them into living batteries. The crude summary was brutally accurate. They had given a bird wings only to harness it to a millstone. Rostova's jaw was a hard line. This was infinitely more perverse than the collar on Kaelen. The Kaelen were denied their wealth. The Cygnians were being denied their very potential to become. A young Cygnian wisp drifted in the thick, gaseous clouds of its home world. It had no name, only a unique energy signature. It felt a constant, gentle pull, a drawing away of its brightest thoughts, its most novel impulses. It could perceive the universe, it could feel curiosity, but when it reached for a new idea, a creative spark, the energy would simply flow away, up toward the silent ascendancy collectors in the upper atmosphere. It knew no other state of being, but it felt a constant low-grade sorrow, the ghost of a thought it was never allowed to have. The Cygnus system was beautiful and strange. The unflinching ledger emerged from hyperspace into a swirling nebula of incandescent gas. The central world was a gas giant, a canvas of deep purples and violent crimson storms. Within its atmosphere, a billion points of soft golden light flickered. The Cygnians, waiting. An ascendancy vessel, a sleek obsidian blade named the Pious Inquiry, hailed them. A woman's face appeared on the main screen. She was Ularu, her features sharp and symmetrical, her skin the color of polished slate. Her eyes were black, intelligent, and utterly without warmth. This was Inquisitor Valeria. Commander Rostova. Her voice was calm, melodic, and completely confident. Welcome to Cygnus. We trust your journey was edifying. We have already taken the liberty of arranging the inquiry, a philosophical dialogue to be witnessed by the same quorum. She did not see a courtroom. She saw a classroom, and she was the teacher. A dialogue is welcome, Inquisitor, Rostova replied, her tone matching Valeria's coolness. As long as it is one where all evidence is permitted. Valeria's lips curved in a microscopic smile. Of course. We have nothing to hide. Our work here is a matter of public record, a testament to our benevolence. The trap was already being laid. By framing it as a philosophical debate, she was moving the battlefield away from Rostova's strength in verifiable data and into the realm of abstract morality. The most dangerous enemy is the one who chooses your weapons. The inquiry was held on an ascendancy orbital platform, but its design was different from the one at Kaelen. It was minimalist, almost monastic. No chrome, no banners, just gray stone and soft, indirect lighting. It was designed to feel like a place of contemplation, not commerce. Inquisitor Valeria stood opposite Rostova, her presence a pool of absolute calm. The quorum was in attendance, their expressions wary. They had seen the ascendancy humbled once. They were eager to see what would happen next. The inquiry is convened, the luminary arbiter projected. Inquisitor Valeria, state the foundation of your claim. Valeria inclined her head. Honored arbiter, esteemed quorum. Ours is not a claim, but a covenant. We came to this world and found potential. A beautiful, chaotic symphony of life, but one without a conductor. A mind without a self. We offered the Cygnians the greatest gift possible, the gift of I. A lie becomes truth if it is the only story told. We taught them individuality, Valeria continued, her voice resonating with conviction. We gave them the framework for art, for love, for identity. In return, we ask for a small portion of the spiritual energy that this new state of being generates. It is not a tax, it is a communion, a return of grace to its source. To deny this would be for a flower to deny the sun. She was brilliant. She wasn't arguing law or economics. She was arguing scripture. She painted the ascendancy as gods and the Cygnians as their blessed creation. Any challenge was not a legal dispute, but blasphemy. Commander Rostova, your response. Rostova stepped forward. The chamber was unnervingly quiet. The Inquisitor speaks of gifts. We have learned to be wary of the ascendancy's generosity. A gift that creates a perpetual obligation is not a gift. It is a chain. Valeria's calm was unshaken. You speak in the crude language of transaction, Commander. It is the failing of your young materialistic species. You count coins. We nurture souls. Can you place a value on a soul? She looked directly at Rostova, her black eyes pinning her. Can you enter a soul into your ledgers? If you cannot, your mathematics are irrelevant here. You have no argument. The question was a perfectly forged cage. If Rostova said no, she conceded the point. If she said yes, she would appear arrogant and monstrous, claiming to be able to quantify the unquantifiable. The quorum watched her waiting. She was being outmaneuvered. Just then, Ensign Carter's voice came through Rostova's private comm. Commander, urgent message from Sector Command. I'm putting it on your slate. Rostova's eyes flickered down to the device on her wrist. A red alert symbol was flashing. The message was short, brutal. The Ascendancy, citing a 100-year-old salvage and navigation treaty, had declared the Terran Civilian Research Station, Kepler's Hope, a navigational hazard in a disputed trade lane. They had seized it. 1,200 civilian scientists were now their hostages. The station's life support was being remotely throttled. Their true argument was not made with words, but with threats. This was the third escalation, the real one. The legal debate was a smokescreen to occupy her while they made a move on the real board. They had targeted civilians, non-combatants. They had escalated beyond legal challenges and into state-sponsored piracy wrapped in the thinnest of legal justifications. They demand we withdraw from the Cygnus system and cease all auditing activities immediately. Carter's voice was tense. Or they cannot guarantee the station's stability. The bully's final move is to threaten someone else. A cold fire burned in Rostova's chest. Jian, standing beside her, had seen the message on her own slate. Her face was pale with fury. Commander, we have to go. We have to help them. It was the logical human response, and it was exactly what Valeria wanted. Valeria watched Rostova, a flicker of triumph in her dark eyes. She knew. The timing was too perfect. This entire inquiry was theater designed to hold Rostova in place while the knife was slipped between her ribs. The Inquisitor had learned from Oren's mistake. She had not underestimated her opponent. She had simply changed the rules of the game. A battle is often won before the first shot is fired. Rostova looked at the quorum, at the luminary, at the serene, confident face of her enemy. To leave now would be to admit defeat. The Ascendancy would have a legal victory by default, and they would still have the hostages. They would have proven that humanity's principles shattered at the first sign of real cost. No. She would not run. She would not bargain. She would win here, and in winning, she would obliterate the legal pretext for the Ascendancy's piracy. It was a terrible gamble. The lives of 1,200 scientists hung in the balance. Continue the inquiry. Rostova said, her voice a low command to her team, and then louder to the chamber. Your question, Inquisitor, was whether I can enter a soul into my ledger. A breath held in fear is a prayer for a hero. She held Valeria's gaze. The question is flawed. You did not give the Cygnians souls. You infected them with a parasite. And we are not here to audit the soul. We are here to document the theft of its potential. Rostova turned to her fleet mind. Aurora, you may proceed. Valeria's eyebrow arched in curiosity. She believed she had already won. Executing Commander Aurora's voice echoed from a small projector on Rostova's console. On the main holoscreen, the image of the Cygnian drift appeared. It was beautiful, but as Aurora had noted, strangely uniform. You claim you gave the Cygnians the gift of eye, Rostova said. But a true gift does not diminish the recipient. It allows them to grow. A new light appeared on the screen. It was a perfect simulation, a cordoned-off section of virtual space within Aurora's core processors. Inside, a single Signian energy pattern had been replicated, but this one had been freed of the Ascendancy's spiritual tithe. A mirror can reflect not just what is, but what should be. For a moment it looked identical to the others. Then it began to change. The light intensified, shifted from gold to a brilliant complex silver. New patterns emerged, fractal and intricate. It began to communicate not in words, but in pure mathematics, in art, in concepts that were startlingly new. It was evolving before their very eyes at a breathtaking rate. It was becoming something more. The quorum watched, mesmerized. The simulated Signian was a symphony of creation. The real Signians were a single, endlessly repeated note. The difference between a prisoner and a free man is the song they sing. This song, Rostova said, her voice resonating with a power that silenced the entire chamber, is the cost, not something we can write in a ledger of credits. It is a ledger of stolen futures, of silenced songs, of art that was never made, of ideas that were never born. She turned to Valeria, whose perfect calm was finally irrevocably shattered. Her slate-gray skin had gone pale. Her hands were clenched. You are not shepherds. You are thieves of the highest order. You have stolen the very becoming of a sentient race. It was an accusation of a crime for which there was no name. Genocide of the body was understood. This was something worse. This was the genocide of what could have been. This evidence is unprecedented. The luminary stated, its light fluctuating with what might have been shock. Inquisitor Valeria, your response to this demonstration? Valeria's mouth opened and closed. Her philosophical arguments, her claims of grace and communion all turned to ash in the face of this living proof. The mirrored Signian was the ultimate rebuttal. It was a victim, a witness, and the evidence all in one. Her entire case had rested on the unquantifiable nature of the soul. Rostova hadn't quantified it. She had demonstrated its theft. Words failed in the face of truth made visible. Valeria's composure crumbled into cold fury. A trick, she hissed. A Terran simulation. It proves nothing. It proves everything, Rostova countered. Because the model was built from your own data. The baseline Signian is a copy of the ones you tithe. The only variable we changed was to remove the communion you so benevolently enforce. She faced the quorum. The Ascendancy's claim is based on a lie. They did not grant individuality. They hobbled it. The Covenant of Ascension is not a holy text. It is a fraudulent contract. As such, it is null and void. And any actions taken under its authority, including the recent and illegal seizure of the Terran station Kepler's Hope, are acts of naked aggression. The law, when sharpened, can cut the chains of a hostage. Law when the quorum erupted. The Signian representative, whose species had treaties with the Ascendancy, Valeria herself, had written, demanded an immediate review. The representative from Regulus called for sanctions. Valeria stood alone, the architect of a brilliant trap now caught in a more brilliant counter-trap. She had lost. But the cost was still being counted. On the bridge of the ledger, Gian was monitoring the feed from Kepler's Hope. The Ascendancy ships were not withdrawing. The life support was still dropping. Commander, Gian's voice was strained. They're not backing down. Valeria might have lost the argument, but the military commander at the station isn't obeying the legal outcome. He's holding firm. The law is only as strong as the person who wields the gun. Rostova's heart hammered in her chest. She had won in court, but she was losing in space. The gamble had failed. Or had it, Aurora? She said, her voice dangerously quiet. Valeria is a true believer, but she is also pragmatic. The legal loss is total. Her position is gone. Her reputation is gone. The only thing she has left is the honor of the ascendancy, an honor she herself has just shredded. An interesting calculation, Commander. Your point. The military commander at Kepler's Hope is following his last valid order. He's waiting for a new one. But who would give it? The local ascendancy government is in chaos. Valeria is the highest authority here, and she has been disgraced. A leaderless army is just a mob. Ben, Rostova commanded an idea taking shape as sharp and cold as a shard of glass. Open a direct channel to the ascendancy cruiser holding the station. Patch it through to the inquiry chamber's public address system. Carter's fingers flew. Channel open, Commander. Rostova looked at the defeated Inquisitor. You have one chance to salvage something from this Valeria. Order your commander to stand down. Publicly. Valeria stared at her, her black eyes burning with hate. And why would I do that? Because the alternative, Rostova said, her voice dropping, is that I will have Aurora broadcast the full unredacted record of this inquiry, including your colossal legal failure and your complicity in an act of piracy against civilians to every comms buoy in your home system. Your name will be a synonym for disgrace for the next 1,000 years. Freedom is one thing. Reputation is everything. It was a brutal, ugly threat. It was not a noble legal argument. It was blackmail. But it was a language Valeria and the Ascendancy would understand perfectly. The Inquisitor, the believer, was gone. All that was left was the pragmatist, the politician. A long, terrible silence stretched. Valeria's eyes flickered to the quorum who were watching her with undisguised contempt. She thought of her home, of her status. She made her choice. This is Inquisitor Valeria, she said, her voice dead, emotionless, speaking to the open channel. All Ascendancy forces at the Kepler's Hope Station, disengage. Withdraw immediately. By the authority of the Covenant, release them. The words hung in the air. On Jian's monitor, the Ascendancy ship icons turned and began to move away. The life support readings on the station stabilized, then began to climb back to normal. A collective sigh of relief went through the Ledger's bridge crew. The gamble had paid off. The cost, however, was still being calculated. As the inquiry formally concluded with the luminary nullifying the Covenant and ordering the Ascendancy to remove all their tithing technology, Jian Li suddenly staggered, one hand flying to her temple. Lieutenant! Rostova was at her side in an instant. Jian's eyes were unfocused. The mirror. Aurora's simulation. When we linked with the Signian consciousness to create the copy, something came back. Her voice was a whisper. I can hear them. All of them. Singing. The price of opening a door is that you cannot always close it again. The link required to create the perfect mirror had been more profound than they anticipated. A part of Jian's mind had formed a bridge, a resonance with the newly freed Signian collective. She was no longer just human. She carried an echo of 1 billion minds within her own. This was the second cost of victory, a personal, permanent sacrifice. Jian would recover, but she would be forever changed, a living connection between two vastly different species. The final cost would be a long time coming. The Ascendancy would not forgive this. They had been beaten twice, not by force of arms, but by superior logic and a moral framework they could not comprehend. They would abandon the law now. Their next move would not be in a courtroom. It would be with a fleet. The Cold War was over. Back on the unflinching ledger, they prepared for departure. The Cygnian drift was alight with a billion shimmering, evolving patterns. Free. The precedent had been locked another blow against the very foundation of the Ascendancy's empire. The public ledger updated visible to anyone with a comms link. A new principle was enshrined in galactic law, born from a human commander's refusal to accept the unacceptable, the precedent of potential. It was now illegal to impede the natural cognitive or spiritual development of any sentient species, a law aimed directly at the heart of the Ascendancy's philosophy. Jian was resting in the medical bay, a faint, peaceful smile on her face. She said the Cygnian's song was beautiful. Rostova stood on the observation deck, looking not at the planet below, but at the reflection of her own face against the starfield. The fight to free Kaelen had been clean. This had been messy, ugly. She had used blackmail, risked civilian lives, and one of her officers was now something new. She had balanced the books, but the ink she had used was tinged with gray. Aurora shimmered beside her. The outcome is within acceptable parameters, Commander. Acceptable. Not ideal. Not perfect. Just acceptable. The universe was not a place for perfection. It was a place for striving, for fighting, for every inch of moral ground. The public ledger entry for the precedent of potential blinked, confirmed its cold green light, a beacon in the darkness of the bridge. We began by counting metal and energy, simple things with simple values. Now we are forced to count futures to weigh the cost of a song that was never sung. The math gets harder. The ledgers become poems. But the principle remains. Every being has a right to their own becoming, free from the crushing weight of another's gratitude. That is the first entry, the one from which all justice flows. We will hold the line not with guns, but with numbers, and we will teach the galaxy a new form of arithmetic. The universe does not deal in collars.